everyone. My name is Kathy Philbin, and I'm an advisor in the Organizational Studies program, and I would like to officially welcome you to OS Info Night. We've got a whole team of people here, including faculty, staff, students, and alumni, here to share information with you, and I'll introduce each of them as we get to their portions of the program later in the presentation. I can introduce one other staff member right now, and that is Chelsea Williams. Chelsea, can you say hello quickly? Chelsea is our communications and event coordinator for OS, and she created the sessions registration page that you signed up on and all the advertising materials for tonight's program. Advertising this event was a little bit of a challenge in the COVID era, so we're curious about how you found out about this info night. So I'm going to bring up a quick poll, and if you could take a few seconds to respond, we'd appreciate it. Let me see if I can find it here. So we'll give you a few seconds to let us know how you found out about the info night tonight. Okay, I'm gonna end the polling. Everybody put in their votes there. All right. And then I can share the results with all of you. Looks like you found out about this from a number of different sources, which helps us to know that some of our avenues of advertisement were effective. So thank you very much for sharing that information with us. All right. One more thing about logistics before we dive into the actual program presentation. We've decided for this webinar not to use the chat or the raise hand feature. Instead, we're going to use the Q&A feature for questions. So two of our current students who are in attendance tonight, Jean Cutter and Mel Stamelman, who are this year's recruitment leads on our student leadership team, they'll be monitoring the Q&A, and we'll break at the end of each section to answer questions. So Jean and Mel, can you both say a quick hello?
Yeah.
Hello.
Hey everybody. I'm Jean.
I'm Mel. Welcome, everyone.
So please feel free, you can tell they're very friendly. Type in your questions and we'll take breaks at various points to make sure we're answering those questions. So I think we're ready to get started. One of the first questions that comes up as you discover org studies as a major at the University of Michigan is, what exactly is organizational studies? Tonight we have the director of the OS program, Dr. Mark Mizrachi, with us to talk a bit more about OS as an academic field of study. So Mark?
Thank you, Kathy. Am I unmuted? I can't see myself.
You're good.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our first ever COVID info night. And one of the things I certainly hope is that when you join us in the fall, as I hope you will, that it will be in person. Anyway, I'm just going to talk for a couple of minutes about what org studies is. And I think a good way to start, next slide, Kathy, is to just point out that organizations are everywhere in the contemporary world. We're in a university right now. Prior to that, you went to school. You may be involved in a religious organization, government at all levels and agencies consists of organizations, corporations, law firms, accounting firms, hospitals, restaurants, social movements. With the COVID crisis, we've all become much more familiar with the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, the NIH, county and state health departments. These are all organizations, and they're everywhere. It's the kind of thing that they're so ubiquitous that we almost never even think about them. But while OS is a program that provides an interdisciplinary approach to questions such as how organizations operate, how they affect the world, how they are affected by the world, and we ask a whole series of questions. For example, why do people organize in the first place? Why do they create organizations? How do organizations affect the people in them as well as the larger society? How do organizations change? How do individuals create change within organizations? And how do individuals create change through organizations? Org studies addresses all of these questions, and we do so in a liberal arts framework. The fields that we draw on primarily are psychology, sociology, but also economics, as well as political science, communications, the environment, business, public health. And one thing, you probably all know this, but in case you don't, both the social sciences and organizational analysis in particular hold a special place at Michigan. Virtually every one of our social science departments is ranked among the top 4 or 5 in the country. And in OS, we draw on that strength. And many have pointed out now in more recent years that Michigan is the leading center of organizational analysis in the world. And you all have an opportunity to take advantage of that. So before I turn this over to Kathy, I just want to make one little philosophical point here. And it has to do with one of the most important features of our program. We provide a liberal arts education. And as many of you probably know, the liberal arts sometimes gets a bad rap these days. You know, for example, if you're interested in business, why not go to business school? Or why not do public policy or public health? Well, there are a couple of ways to think about the value of a liberal arts education. And one of the best ways is if you go into the Michigan Daily Archives from about 3 or 4 years ago, you'll find a speech by Dick Costello, who was at the time the CEO of Twitter and is a Michigan grad. And in that speech, he talks about the value of his liberal arts education, how it allowed him to see the world in a broader way. And many of the ideas that he developed creatively came from this broad liberal arts education. You know, it's great to learn things like accounting and finance. They're important. You can't run a business without them. And of course, we deal with lots of other kinds of organizations in OS as well, not just for-profit firms, but nonprofits, and again, government and hospitals and all these other kinds of organizations. But the kind of breadth that's needed to really get to the top of an organization, you're required to really see the world in a more encompassing way. And these are the kinds of things that only a liberal arts education can provide. So, you know, and in terms of what kind of job you're going to get afterwards, well, here's just some examples of some of the things that our students do. By the way, our key feeders right now, our key destinations right now are consulting and tech, okay? Finance, real estate, HR, human resources, law, medicine, nonprofit work, government work, the Peace Corps, Teach for America. We have companies coming out of our ears trying to get to our students to recruit. Kathy and the others here and our students can attest to it. If you go into org studies and focus on the liberal arts, you're not going to have to worry about having opportunities when you come out. So I just think that the best that we provide an absolutely fantastic education, and nothing can better prepare you for the world beyond the university than to have majored in org studies. With that, I'm going to turn things back to Kathy, and good luck, everybody. Have a fun evening. You'll learn lots of great stuff tonight, and hope I'll see you in the fall. Take care.
Thank you, Mark. So now we can talk a little bit about the curriculum, but before we do that, I'm gonna throw another poll your way, just so that we get a little information about our audience and what class level you all are. So that if you could let us know where you're at in your academic progress, that would help us to know who we're talking to tonight. I'll give it a couple of seconds. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And I can share the results with you. Most of you are sophomores, which is terrific, perfect timing. Those of you who are first-year students, you have some time yet to explore and prepare, and that's terrific. Sophomores, you'll be making decisions about your major fairly quickly here. And so it's great that you're here tonight to find out whether OS might be a good fit for you. And then I see we have one possible junior or senior, which is fabulous. We welcome those students who are a little more advanced as well, but our curriculum is structured in a way that we'll want to talk with you about how long it would take you to finish the program if you're a little more advanced in your credit. We want to make sure you understand the timeframes involved. So for the one junior in the group, come talk to us. So let me talk a little bit about the curriculum and what you'll be studying as you, how it's structured as you come into the Org Studies program. We have 3 prerequisites that you have to complete: microecon, which is Econ 101 at U of M, intro psych and intro soc, and you have some choices about which courses to take. I'll get rid of those. Sorry. You have some choices about which courses to take. And there are additional prep courses that can be helpful as well. As Dr. Mizrachi was saying, Org Studies pulls courses from a number of different disciplines. And so if you are interested in Org Studies, but also leaning toward economics, you may decide that you want your Org Studies major to include some econ courses at the upper level. And so it would be a good idea to get an additional prereq out of the way, an Econ 102, for example. Communication, another department where there's an intro course that if you want to do some of the upper level work, you need the intro. So getting that done in your first or second year would be a great strategy. Poli-sci, any other areas that you have interest in, it's a good idea to get some of those introductory courses done so that as you get into the junior and senior year, you're ready for those upper levels. It's also a good strategy in your freshman and sophomore year to keep an eye on the distribution and the foreign language and those general requirements. The more of those you get done before you enter Org Studies, the more room and flexibility that you will have. You certainly don't have to have them all done, but it's a good idea to keep an eye on that and make sure you're making some progress toward those general requirements. There's 34 total credits within the Org Studies major, and we'll talk now about how those are broken down a little bit. We have a core requirement, which consists of 2 courses, foundational courses in the study of organizations. Organizational studies has loosely 2 subfields, a micro side and a macro side. The micro side looks at people within organizations and how they function, how they relate to each other, things like leadership and motivation and teamwork and things that deal with the people interacting within organizations. Then there's the macro side, which looks at organizations as actors in and of themselves and how they relate to each other and how they are embedded in the society as a whole and even in a global context. So we have one course, OS 305, that looks at the micro side of things, and a second core course 310 that looks at the macro side. You are also required in Org Studies to do a statistics course, which can be a stats or the Soc 210. There's a sociology statistics that we will accept also. And then there is a senior field research capstone that you will take in Org Studies. OS 410 is our research methods course where you will actually have an opportunity to do some organizational research, looking at the different methods that are applied when people research organizations. And then we also have the opportunity for you to do an honors thesis if you prefer. And an honors thesis is an interesting option with Org Studies because our curriculum is so broad. The honors thesis allows you an opportunity to dive in deeply to a particular interest that you might have and to work closely with a faculty member to create an honors thesis on a particular topic that you are passionate about. So as you move through the junior year, we'll be talking to you a little bit more about the honors option if that's of interest to you. And then the remaining courses, are included in what we call our cluster requirement, and there are 7 courses there. And the 7 courses that you have to take are split up again between this micro and macro dichotomy within organizational studies. So you have 2 courses to do in cluster A, and cluster A is an elective list with a whole bunch of courses on it in psychology and anthropology and all sorts of other stuff. And so you get to choose which 2 courses in cluster A make the most sense for you to take. And then you also do 2 courses in cluster B. And we have an elective list in cluster B that includes some broader courses in econ, poli-sci, communication, other areas there. So 2 courses in A, 2 courses in B, and then 3 additional courses that can come from any cluster. You can do more cluster A if that's what interests you, or you can do more cluster B if you lean more toward the macro side. And then there's also a cluster C, which are courses that are a little more narrowly focused. They tend to be a little more specialized. It is the longest cluster list of electives, so you have a wider choice, and it includes many courses that are non-LS&A courses. There are Ross courses on there, public policy, public health, School of Information, some different courses in cluster C, where again, you can follow your interests a little more directly by taking some more specialized courses there. The additional requirements within the clusters are 2 out of the 7 cluster courses must be within the org study department at the 300 and 400 level. And then only 2 of the courses in the clusters can be at the 200 level. So the 200 level is a lower level course. We want most of your work in your major to be at the 300 and 400 level. So you have a limit on the 200 level courses there. So those are, that's the structure of the curriculum and the requirements that we have that you have to follow, even though there's a lot of flexibility within those requirements. So I'm going to stop for a second and check in with Mel and Jean and see if we've had any questions come through to the Q&A about what Dr. Mizrachi was talking about, or the curriculum structure that I've just gone through.
Yeah, so first question is more of a general question. Will these slides be sent out after the meeting or published anywhere?
Yes, we are actually recording the webinar, and so it will be up on the website within a day or 2 after we get the recording all prepared and edited. But yes, and if you do want the slides separately from the recording, just send an email to org.studies and we can send those out to you. No problem at all.
Perfect. Thank you, Kathy.
Anything else?
Yeah, we have a couple more questions coming through. So one of them being, do the additional prep courses that you were talking about earlier, the non-required courses, would those help get, that person get admitted to the program?
Not necessarily. It's really not something that would come in admissions. It comes in when you are deciding on your cluster A, B, and C courses, the ones that you really want to take in org studies. If you decide, again, for example, that you want to lean toward econ and that econ is an interest of yours and you want your org studies curriculum to reflect some econ courses, if you've taken Econ 101, you, for the most part, can take Econ 300 levels. But if you want a 400 level econ, you have to have the 102. Otherwise, you don't have the prereq to take that. So if you're thinking of either another major that you might want to double major with org studies, because you can do that, or a major or a discipline that you think is going to be something that you're going to pull a lot of your org studies curriculum from a particular area of interest, so econ or poli-sci or communication, then getting those intros done will open up the curriculum more for you in that junior and senior year. But as far as admissions is concerned, it's not something that we'll be looking at closely.
Perfect, thank you. Another question is that if a student is accepted to org studies and they have previously taken an OS course that is on one of the cluster lists, does that count for the cluster requirements?
Indeed, it does. Anything, as you are admitted to org studies, anything that we see that is on our curriculum list, we will pull in and count in your curriculum for org studies. So there are many students who come into org studies with a nice little head start with either some 200 level org studies courses, or again, they've had an interest in econ or poli-sci or communications or something like that, sociology, psychology, and they've got a few courses that they've taken that they appear on our curriculum list. And we will pull those in and allow those to count.
Awesome, thank you. Another question that we have gotten is, would we have new advisors specific to OS if we declare an OS major?
Indeed, you will. We have two different advisors right now who work with org studies majors. I am one of them, and I'm a full-time advisor, so I see a lot of our students. And then our lecturer in the program, Dr. Lisa Fine, who teaches some of our courses in organizational culture and prisons and social control. She's got deviance courses, organizational wrongdoing. She's got some really interesting topics that she teaches. She is also able to do major advising. And then Emily, who you'll meet later, is our student services coordinator. She's mostly focusing on prospective student advising. So some of you may have met her already, but eventually probably she's relatively new. She'll be trained in advising as well. So you'll have a choice of advisors within the program. You will keep your general advisor. So if you have a Noonan advisor or a CSP advisor or an honors advisor or an RC advisor, you will keep that person as well to help keep track of your distribution and your general kinds of things. But you will also get a dedicated org studies advisor as well. Good questions. What else is out there?
Great. So from a student, will I be at a disadvantage, or will my application be lower on the list if I'm not taking the third prerequisite, Econ 101, until next semester?
No, you won't be lower on the list. We do allow one prerequisite to be in progress. However, we know that econ is that tough prereq. And so if we do notice which prereqs you've got completed, and we do look at your performance in those prereqs. Some students choose to transfer in the econ, that's fine as well. Some students have fulfilled it by AP, that's fine as well. So we really can't ding anybody for how they've completed certain prereqs. It's just not anything that it's going to weigh heavily. However, we do note that econ is a tough course. So if someone has done it at U of M, we do notice that, and it's part of their record. And so it's part of the overall picture we look at for admissions. And we'll talk a little bit more about admissions later in the presentation. We are going to get to all those admissions questions. But no, I wouldn't worry if econ, the way it's fit in your curriculum, especially with all this COVID stuff, who knows who's taken what when, because it's just been crazy. If you're landing so that is your prereq that's in progress, don't worry, that is not going to be a make or break factor in your application.
And then maybe let's just do one more question and then we'll keep the ball rolling.
Okay.
So somebody asked if there is a list of available cluster courses that they can look at and kind of explore. And then I guess also just what kind of OS classes can they take before applying?
Gotcha. Our website, if you go into the prospective student section, has some information on the curriculum, and it has some accordion folders with drop-down lists of all the cluster A, B, and C courses. So you can take a look there. And what was the second part of that?
Just, are there specific
OS courses?
Yeah.
We are, this past fall, we didn't have any 200 level courses offered in org studies. It just turned out the way the faculty were teaching, it didn't turn out to be having any on offer. But for the winter term, we do have several 200 level courses. Those are open to anyone. And so hopefully you can grab a spot in one of those if those are of interest to you. Some of our 400 level seminars will have some spaces available as well. Mostly those are limited to juniors and seniors, but there are occasions where sophomores can get a space. For first years, it's the 200 levels that probably will be the most beneficial for you. So if you want, if you look at those 400 level seminars, you'll see at the start of registration, most of the spaces are reserved for org studies majors. But once all of our students finish registering, then we will open up those spaces. And if you're at least a sophomore, you could email the professor and ask whether or not that would be a possibility for you. But we do have two big 200 level courses, one on leadership and one on business and the environment. And both of those are over 100 in enrollment with David Sweetman and Sarah Stoderstrom, who are two fabulous professors. So if one of those is of interest, hopefully you'll be able to grab a spot. And those are freshman or sophomore. All right, so shall we continue on with the presentation? And then if more questions, if we can get to some at the end, we can do that as well. All right, so we've talked about how big and broad the curriculum is and all these elective lists that you have to choose from. We want you to be able to make sense of all that choice that you have. OS is very flexible, and that's a wonderful thing. It allows you to customize your education. But we also want you to be pursuing some goal, to have your course choices make sense to you in terms of what your educational goals are. And the way we do that is with a tool that we call the OS Pathway. With so much choice, we want to make sure that your course choices are intentional and thoughtful in terms of which of the cluster A, B, and C courses that you're choosing. The pathway that we ask you to write, and we do, this is a requirement, you write it in your sophomore year just after you're admitted to org studies. We will ask you to write a pathway, and the pathway has two parts. It has a paragraph, a narrative paragraph where you talk about what your academic goals are. It can include career goals, but it doesn't have to. Some students, as they enter org studies, don't know what career they're headed toward. And so they just include the academic endeavors that are exciting them at that moment. And so your pathway narrative talks about what you want to get out of your org studies education and how you want to put courses together to make that work. The second part of the pathway is we'll give you a list of all the courses in cluster A, B, and C, and you check off which ones you think are most interesting to you in cluster A, which are most interesting in cluster B, and which you think you might want to take in cluster C. That some students start their pathway with the paragraph. They have an idea of what they want to do and they can articulate that. And so they write their paragraph and then they go choose the courses that fit with those goals that they have articulated in their pathway. Other students have a little more trouble articulating, and so they go to the course list first. They check off the courses that most interest them, and then they look for common themes and try to kind of get at what their interests are based on the courses that they've chosen and use that reflection to write their paragraph. And so the pathway is your own document of your plan and your map to move through org studies. But it's important to note that it is flexible. It can change over time. We usually ask students to rewrite the pathway again at the beginning of their senior year because we know your interests may have changed. You may look at your pathway at one point when you're taking courses in the program and say, this doesn't really reflect where I am right now, and decide to rewrite it. If you go onto the OS website, our current student pathways are on the website, just the paragraph part. It doesn't have all the courses because sometimes you can't tell what courses you're actually going to get into and things like that. But the paragraph is there for all our students, so you can get an idea of the kinds of different things our students are doing. And you'll notice on that pathway part of the OS website, there are tiles that kind of group the pathways in certain areas. do not feel that you have to make your pathway fit into one of those tiles. You do not. That's just our way of helping org study students find other students in the program that are interested in kind of the same things that they are. So your pathway can be under more than one tile. If your pathway is a little bit different, we can create a brand new tile for you. So don't let that feel limiting in any way, but do take a look at the pathways. You can get some ideas of what our students are studying and kind of the breadth of interests within the org studies program. Here's some sample pathways with nonprofits, human resources, corporate social responsibility, positive leadership. We've got pathways in education, environment, public health, legal, all sorts of different things. And again, the pathway is your own unique creation. And so you will start to kind of crystallize your interests and see how you want to use org studies and create a pathway as you start out in the program and then revise it as you go through. We do have some current students here who are going to tell you a little bit about their pathways. So for our 4 students right now, I'm going to kind of introduce each of them. And for right now, please just talk about your pathway and how you're using the different courses in cluster A, B, and C, how you're kind of making the academic pathway through your org studies major. So let's see, Jean, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sounds good. So my pathway is looking at sustainability in businesses and kind of how that is reflected in leadership and just organizational effectiveness as a whole. And class-wise, I think that I've been able to kind of incorporate those leadership elements and the organizational effectiveness elements with the environment side of it pretty well. I originally was an environment minor for a bit, but I ended up having to drop that just because of COVID stuff. But that was going really well. So I have taken a lot of courses in the School of Environment, which have all really complemented well with each other.
Mel, why don't you go next?
So my pathway is business law. So I've taken a bunch of OS courses like negotiations, for example, but I've also taken classes in Ross, sociology, poli-sci, et cetera, to get a real comprehensive understanding of the legal environment that businesses navigate. However, I am kind of pivoting at the moment, refocusing a bit more towards tech because that's what I'm going into after graduation. But even still really have gotten a great comprehensive understanding of businesses and law, and that also includes tech businesses.
Thanks, Mel. And you bring up a great point that even with a pathway, with org studies being the broad liberal arts education, that pivoting becomes a little easier when you have a broad set of courses under your belt. So next, I'm going to introduce 2 more seniors who are student panelists for this evening. We've got Kim Lau and Jordan Schuler, both here, who are seniors in the program. So Kim, why don't we start with you to talk about your pathway and your academic interests?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Kim. My pathway is called Creative Marketing and Advertising Strategies in Business Operations. And so I'm really interested in like that psychology part of business and kind of understanding the consumer. And so in terms of classes, something really cool about org studies is that you can take classes like Mel said and Ross. So a lot of my classes have been through there. Also with study abroad, I've been able to transfer my international marketing classes, and like I've taken an organizational studies class abroad too that have transferred.
Great. And Jordan?
Hi, everyone. So my pathway is the social impact of constitutional law and political action. And I'm interested in going to law school. And so I've been able to use OS to take a really interdisciplinary approach to studying that. So I've taken sociology classes, I've taken OS classes. I also petitioned to get a history course counted that, although it's not listed on the current list of classes that are a part of the curriculum, if there's a class that you feel relates to your pathway and has an organizational studies element to it, you can actually petition to get that course counted as a part of your major. So I took an American constitutional history class that I really loved and was able to count it toward my major. And I will say that OS has made it really easy to write some law school essays that have asked me about my interest in law school and particular programs I might be interested in at different law schools, because the interdisciplinary approach that OS has allowed me to take gives me a lot of different avenues and ways to be able to talk about it and write a really compelling statement.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna go to the next slide here on the student experience, and then we're gonna bring all our 4 students back into things here. OS is not just an academic program. It's a small program, and we are also a community, and we try to build community at every opportunity within the program. The opportunities for involvement in OS, there are some specific student leadership roles like peer mentors or recruitment leads like Jean and Mel are, or social media leads. There are some organizations in org studies, and then there are all sorts of activities that the program sponsors to try to connect students to each other and to connect students to alumni, to students who may be coming into the program. We want kind of a continuum of community as we move through the program. So now our students are going to talk a little bit about their favorite parts of OS and some of the things they've done outside the academic realm that have been interesting for them. So let's see, Jordan, why don't we just throw it right back to you and talk about your favorite parts of OS?
So my favorite part of OS, and everybody is probably going to say this, and everybody you talk to from OS will say this, so it'll sound cliche, but there's a reason that everybody says it, and that's the community and the people that you meet. It's not an exaggeration to say that I think I was most bummed out about quarantine and the pandemic when I came back to campus, because I wasn't going to be able to have classes in person with my cohort and hang out in person with my cohort, because we all got really, really close fall semester of last year when we were taking courses together. But admittedly, when I've had like hangouts with small groups of people outdoors and safe, a lot of them have been with OS people. And so certainly the people that I've met are my favorite part of the program. And although it's not exactly outside of academics, I did take a class last semester it was an OS 490 class, which is a research-based class, and it was about coffee markets in Costa Rica. And over spring break, we actually traveled to Costa Rica to get to go to coffee farms and talk to coffee producers. And it was a really incredible experience to be able to do hands-on research and travel, because I didn't go abroad. So that was a chance for me to get to experience something a little bit different. And again, the people were really great. It was so much fun to travel with other OS students and an OS professor. And it's definitely one of the highlights of my college experience.
Great. Why don't we go to Mel?
All right. So 1000% echoing what Jordan said. I'm honestly beyond thankful for the community that OS has given me. I think all of us older kids can say here that it feels pretty rare to make so many new friends, especially so many close friends as a junior, and OS has given us that and more. It made Michigan, which is initially pretty dauntingly big, feel like a small school, and I felt that from the amazing resources and one-on-one help from Kathy to the small classes that we have and group projects, and really getting to know the special people I spend my time with. So definitely the community.
Great. Jean?
Awesome. Definitely agree with Jordan and Mel. I'm very grateful for the community that OS offers. And not only with people in my cohort too, but we also have like a buddy system with the junior cohort below us that we just had our buddy reveal last night. So I'm very excited to get to know them, because it's obviously a crazy time. We can't run into them on the 8th floor of Weiser. But also beyond that, the alumni are seriously such an amazing, not only resource, but just source of support. And you'll run into them everywhere, which is kind of crazy, and they're always so willing to help you out. Like for an example, our 310 class was taught by Professor Sanford, and he emailed me over the break and he was like, "Hi, I know an OS alumni who's in Boulder, which is where I'm from. You should connect." And so we got coffee for 3 hours and just talked about life, and she was amazing. But I think that's definitely my favorite thing is that it's a smaller alumni base than other maybe other larger majors, but because of that, people are way more connected with the OS community.
Great. And Kim?
Yeah, just to go off what Jean was saying about alumni, like they are so willing to help you, and especially like they're so excited to get to know you. I had a similar experience. I was interning in New York City and I emailed an OS alum and she was like so excited and asked to get coffee. And again, I had like such a great conversation with her. And then obviously going off of what everyone says, the community, I think it's really cool that I can genuinely say that I know everyone in my cohort on like a personal friend level. And obviously because we spend so much time together, but even that, like we still want to spend more time with each other. Like one of my highlights that I mentioned was OS 305 Friendsgiving, which was completely student run. Had nothing to do with professors or classes. We like genuinely wanted to have this Friendsgiving with each other. And then even the program itself does a really good job with social events, like midnight breakfast, as I put down. People just like want to spend time with each other. And then in terms of other involvement that I've loved about OS, I would say the Malkin shadowing program is really cool. It's where you get to shadow an OS alum for a day. So I got to go to New York City and shadow a woman that works at Adobe in digital marketing and strategy. And it's completely paid for by OS. You have to apply, but it was such a cool experience. And then another thing that goes off of the alumni is OS does these meetups in major cities. So last summer I went to one in New York City. And this was the summer before my junior year, so I hadn't really been in the program, but there were so many people, from people who had just graduated, people who were coming in, or people who were there from the start of the program, and everyone was just so excited. And it got me so excited to enter because everyone was just telling me how excited they were for me, that I was about to have these next 2 years. And yeah, it definitely like surpassed my expectations by so far.
Great. Thank you all for sharing your experiences, and gives a little bit of flavor of, again, the fact that OS has some special things about it as an academic program, but also some special things as a home for you at U of M for your last 2 years. All right. So maybe we'll pause for questions here for just a second. Mel and Jean, were there any questions about the student experience and pathway things that we need to kind of address right now?
Yeah, I think that somebody had a question about going abroad with org studies, and it's been touched on a little bit, but I think both Kim and I went abroad. I can just answer it really fast.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Both Kim and I went abroad, and it was honestly very, very flexible. Kathy was great trying to get all of our abroad classes to count for our majors. And yeah, it's very, very doable. Kathy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think half of our cohort went abroad, maybe more.
Yeah, you guys were over half in your particular cohort.
So it's definitely doable if you're looking for that.
And hopefully next year that'll be something that will be feasible. Our huge junior cohort abroad all had to come home early, which was unfortunate, but at least they got a little bit of time in on their abroad sites. Anything else for answering right now?
Yeah, another question is, what happens if you're admitted to OS and you join, but you don't know what you want your pathway to be?
We have a workshop right after you're admitted. We'll have an orientation where you'll be introduced to the culture of the program, and you'll meet the faculty and some current students and all that good stuff. And then following that, the peer mentors, who are 2 seniors who are in the program, will lead a workshop on pathway creation. And there'll be current students there representing different types of pathways to kind of help guide you a little bit. And the peer mentors will give good advice. This year, we held our orientation in person right before the shutdown. And then our pathway workshop had to go online. And so our two peer mentors from last year, Christiana and Abby, created a video about pathway creation. And then they had a Zoom workshop where you could go into different breakout rooms depending on your interest and all that. So we will assist you with the pathway formation, but it is your creation. So eventually it will just come down to you expressing your interests. And if it's very vague at the start, that's fine. It will gain focus as you take more courses and move through the program. And so again, it may be a case where you would be changing it somewhat frequently if you started out quite vague and you start to hone in on your interests a little more.
And that's it for questions for now.
All right. So let's move on to career stuff. As you have heard, our alumni move off into various different career paths. The most common in the past couple of classes have been both consulting and human resources, but also a lot of folks going into the tech sector. But we have marketing, education, public health, environment, law school, all sorts of things. The broad interests of org study students lead to many, many different careers. And because org studies is interdisciplinary and providing you with a strong, broad liberal arts education, it provides great preparation for law school, for MBA stuff, for masters in public health or masters in social work. We've had people go on to psychology and sociology graduate degrees, public policy, education, all sorts of things. We even have, I think now, 8 medical doctors among our alumni. So OS is great for pre-med as well. And you can either go straight on to graduate school, or many students will do a gap year or to go into the workforce for several years before they decide to head off to graduate school. And with all the talk of our fabulous alumni, we actually have 2 of our fabulous alumni here tonight to talk with you about how OS translates into the professional world. We have Jason Rowland and Sarah van der Zanden. Jason is a May 19 grad and Sarah was in May of 12. And they are here to talk with you a little bit about their journey through OS and how it has translated for them into the professional world. So Jason and Sarah, I'm going to let you introduce yourselves as you talk about your path through OS and what you're doing now. So let's see, shall we start with Jason?
Okay. Hi everyone, I am Jason. I graduated in May of 2019, so back during the good old days. And so when I was at Michigan, I studied org studies and that was my major. And then my pathway was, or my concentration was in human capital management. And so kind of outside of OS, I minored in writing through the Sweetland Writing Center. And then I was in the Michigan Daily. And so for 2 years, I was a managing section editor for a section called Michigan in Color. And so basically when I went into org studies, my initial goal was to go straight through and then do the 4 years at Michigan and then go straight to law school. So it really wasn't until after I interned at Google in summer of 2018 that I decided to take a few years off and make some money and get some experience and do all that. And so that summer I was a bold intern at Google in people operations. And so my team, it was called the Google School for Leaders. And basically they do trainings on management and leadership for executives at the company. So most other companies, it's just executive development. And so I think at that summer I learned so many different things about professionalism and all that. That was my first real work experience at an actual company. But I would say as it relates to org studies, I was so surprised to see that people knew what org studies was, and specifically they knew what org studies at Michigan was. So I remember one day I was wearing my org studies shirt And multiple people stopped me to be like, oh my God, like I was in org studies. I graduated in like this year. We should get coffee sometime and we should talk. Even people who didn't go to Michigan, they like the second that I told them I went to Michigan, they'd be like, oh, did you major in org studies? And so I thought that was cool because I was used to like explaining on campus what org studies was. But like, it was nice just like being in an environment where like everybody knew what it was. My manager had a PhD in organizational development, which is very similar to org studies. So I thought that was cool. And then also I remember I was talking to my manager one day, and we were talking about one of the research projects she was working on. And it sounded a lot like one of the theories we were talking about in class. And so on a limb, I just mentioned, I was like, this sounds like resource partitioning theory. Are you familiar with it? And we actually like sat down and had probably a half an hour discussion about like how that theory applies to the work that we were doing. So in addition to just realizing that people knew what org studies was, it was also a lot of the concepts that we were talking about in class. It was cool to like see then how that applied in the real world in like a real organization. So it was an amazing summer, and then came back to campus. And so now I'm in a rotational program at Google. And so it's called the People Ops Rotational Program. And it's a 2-year rotational program. So it's 2 1-year rotations. And so I actually just switched teams like a month ago onto my second rotation. And so I'm currently on, it's called a go-to-market team. And we partner with different teams throughout people operations in Google to help launch their change initiatives across the company. So I've only been doing it for a month, but so far it's been very interesting. And my last rotation was on the staffing comms team. And so this team, staffing is basically, it's like recruiting, sourcing, everything that like, it's basically hiring. So like any of the people you talk to get a job at Google, they live in staffing. And so I was on the central communications and change management team. And so I kind of broke my role into like 3 separate buckets. And so one was like purely communications. So there were like a few newsletters that I helped manage. And then I'd also take a look and like edit people's emails for accuracy and clarity if it was going out to the entire org. Another bucket was kind of more of like the program manager side. And that was, I partner with teams to help build out a communications plan. And so like if they were going to launch a change, I'd say a month before you launch a change, you should have like a lunch and learn session. Follow that up 2 days later with like this email out to this group of people. Like a week after that, follow that up with an email to managers. So it was kind of like building out communications plans and then helping launch and land change initiatives across staffing. And the final bucket was audience analysis. And so this was doing focus groups, interviews, and surveys with staffers across the org, trying to figure out like, are they getting the content they need from us? How can we be more effective? Should we be exploring different mediums? And so my manager, when she told me about that part of my work, like initially I was like, I have no idea where to start. But then I remembered OS 410, which is like the research class. And I literally logged onto Canvas like at work and was going through all the different PowerPoints. I was like reading through all the different like readings that we were assigned. And that was a lifesaver. And so the project happened successfully. And like, I just kind of credit that to the fact that like org studies did prepare us for really all of the different experiences. Because like when I first had the conversation with my intern manager about like the org studies theories, I thought like, this is a crazy coincidence. But like in hindsight, it makes sense because org studies is the study of organizations, and like everything we do is within an organization or affected by an organization or like created by an organization. So I don't think it's a coincidence. I really do think org studies equips us with like the ability to just better understand the world around us. So I mean, that was my biggest takeaway, is like all the connections between the work that I like, or what I learned in org studies and the work that I'm doing now. So yeah, that's me.
Great, thank you, Jason. And we'll, if anybody has questions for you, we'll get to those in a minute. Sarah, why don't you introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about what you've been up to?
Yes, definitely. Well, hi, everyone. I'm Sarah, and I graduated in 2012. So somehow I've been out of school for 8.5 years now, which is unbelievable. Since I graduated, I've been working in the nonprofit and social impact sectors, and have been primarily in organizational leadership and program management roles, and have kind of found a niche and specialty in organizational growth and change. So I find myself in these positions where it's like, everything's thrown up into the air, help us make sense of it. I always like to just point out that I think there's a perception in the nonprofit sector that everyone who goes into nonprofits is super purpose driven, and I have so many issues that I'm super passionate about. But what really motivates me and what my passion is shaping the strategic direction of mission-based organizations. So in every opportunity that I've taken or considered, that's my question, is like, okay, is there an opportunity for me here to develop systems and strategies that will create greater efficiency and greater impact in our world and catalyze social change? So that's how I've kind of gone about making decisions throughout my career in the broad, very broad overview. And then within org studies, my path to and through it, I really had to go back. I like pulled up my transcript and I was like, what did I do all those years ago? But I think I'm pretty sure I declared 4 majors before finding org studies. And landed on OS because it let me combine all of my interests, like sociology, psychology, programming the environment, around a really practical framework. And that has been valuable to me every day since graduation. My pathway within org studies was sustainable food systems. And then I also had a really big focus on nonprofits and social movements. And the amazing thing, everyone has mentioned this, but org studies is so broad and interdisciplinary that I've been able to frame my degree differently based on different jobs I'm applying for, different opportunities, different audiences. So it really works for you. Like it keeps working for me, and I'm almost 9 years out at this point. So my job search, I just wanted to mention this because as a nonprofit person, I think my job search was really different from a lot of my peers. Because nonprofits aren't usually represented at the big career fairs, and there's not a summer internship opportunity for most nonprofits that will lead to a job offer a year out. And so my strategy for job searching in org studies toward the end was to really build connections with my GSIs, especially in my kind of specialized classes. So I took this ethics of food course and the social movements course, and I really just latched onto those GSIs and said, okay, give me all your resources, all your connections, tell me what email distribution lists I need to get signed up for. And that is actually how I found out through an email distribution list about the job that I ended up starting 2 days after graduation. And it was 100% my dream job, not with a dream salary, but that came later, as it often does in the nonprofit sector. But my first role out of school was a program manager at the YMCA of Greater Grand Rapids. And my role was to manage all of their food access programs. So I was managing a farmer's market, a veggie van, which was like this big refrigerated box truck that I drove all over the city of Grand Rapids, and nutrition education programs. And I really, as a 22-year-old person who just graduated, got to build these programs from the ground up. By the time I left, I was there about 3 years. I was managing 21 mostly part-time employees. So just an incredible opportunity right out of the gate. And then my now husband and I decided to move to Seattle after I was at the YMCA for 3 years. And I had a couple of shorter term, like transitional opportunities through that move, which was kind of stressful because you're like, oh, like this is a lot of transition. Is this narrative making sense? You can make it all make sense later. So I think I stressed out too much about that. But then in Seattle, I ended up really landing in an executive director role at a nonprofit called Facing Homelessness. So grassroots nonprofit, engaging the community as a part of the solution to help end homelessness. And it was an incredible career opportunity in so many ways because the organization was really positioned to grow. So when I joined, it was a $200,000 annual budget, so tiny. And when I left just a few months ago, it had a $1.4 million annual budget. And I had the opportunity to build an organizational structure and build the team to really support that growth, which was great. And then I also got to build and launch and really operationalize a new model for providing permanent housing to people experiencing homelessness that I got to give a TED Talk about. And that model is now being replicated across the United States. So it was a 4-year whirlwind. And I left facing homelessness in May without my next opportunity lined up. So that I'm a person who like really attaches, for better or worse, a lot of my identity to my work. So that was a really vulnerable kind of move. But in that role, I realized, okay, I love what I'm doing and I'm committed to social change and nonprofit work, but I feel like I don't have all the tools to do the most that I want to do, to be the most effective. And I also just did not have the time or capacity to think about next steps, especially with a growth mindset when I was working like 60 hours a week. So I took a break, and within a month of taking a break, I accidentally kind of started a business, a consulting business, working with nonprofits and providing strategic, operational, and fundraising support. It just became clear that nonprofits were in a really dire position through COVID. And I felt like I could help. So I did that. And then the big news and the big change is that as I was kind of assessing what additional tools I wanted to create change and what I wanted to be doing, I decided to apply to law school. I just realized that again and again throughout my nonprofit career, I just continued to encounter these barriers to creating change. And there are systemic barriers that are really, you've got to bulldoze them down in order to realize organizational mission. But I didn't have the tools or frankly, the access or power to really address those things. So now I'm hopefully going to law school in the fall. Yeah, just kind of a big old pivot in my career. But I do hope to stay within or near the nonprofit sector, just working more within kind of legal aid and legal advocacy organizations. So that brings me up to the current day. And I think I'll just wrap up by saying what has been so valuable about org studies. I said one thing, which is that you can frame the degree differently based on your audience and your goal. Like it's like it's a living program, like it keeps living with you and you get to realize these different things that you learned and you get to talk about those different things in different situations. And then the last thing is that the org studies framework is so applicable. Like I get to apply it in my work every single day, which I think is so rare for a liberal arts degree. And my husband, who is an engineer at Google, is constantly saying, like, I'm so jealous of your degree because you learned in college all the things I'm having to learn now. And it turns out like that broad liberal arts skill set is actually what gets you ahead in your career. He's like, I can be a great engineer, but without these skills, I'm not going anywhere. So it's such a great degree. You can make it work for you in so many different ways. And if anyone out there is interested in nonprofits, just please access me. Find me on LinkedIn. I'm here as a resource.
Thank you, Sarah and Jason, for your stories. Lovely to know that OS is living through you as you head out. And when you join OS, you do have access to alumni that have graduated before you. We ask students as they graduate if they would be willing to share their email address with our current students if they want to contact them about their job. And we now have a list of over 600, I think, alumni that are willing to receive emails from current students that want to ask them about their journeys into the career world. So let's stop for a second. And Jean and Mel, are there any questions maybe for our alums that have come through the Q&A?
Yeah, Jason and Sarah, could you guys just touch a bit more about the alumni network and how active current students are with alumni and how everyone helps each other out?
Do you want to take this on, Jason?
Yeah, I can try. So I feel like for me, I've only been out for like, I guess coming up 2 years now. And so like I have not gone to any of like the formal alumni events. But I have noticed, at least like at Google, just like the ones that I do run into, like they're all very passionate about org studies. And then I know, at least for me personally, I've also interacted with a lot of current students now. And I think this year I've probably done between like 5 to 10 mock interviews with like students who are applying to Google or just like other tech companies. And I don't think I'm the exception at all. Like, I know other people in my cohort are also talking with current students, and like especially the ones who are like working at the companies that students are interested in working at. So I can't really speak to the entire alumni network, but I know that like for me and people in my cohort, we're very actively like and very open to have these like mock interviews or just like career conversations with current students.
Jason, did you participate in the MUR program, the mock interview program?
I did, yeah, I did. And then a few of them, I think with one person, we even had like additional follow-up meetings after that. And I like did resume reviews for them. But even outside of that, people have been reaching out via like LinkedIn with questions. So yeah, it's a very active and very like, I don't know, I think it's a good relationship to have.
We do have a program in the fall called MIRR, M-I-R-R, which stands for Mock Interview and Resume Review. And we send an email out to our alums and say, could you give a little time to talk to current students and review their resumes and possibly do a mock interview with them? And the alumni sign up and they tell us what days they have available. And then we match them with current students and they can get together. Jason sounds like he did a few current students with resume review as well as mock interview to kind of get our students ready for the big job push in the fall. So Sarah, did you want to add anything?
Nope, that sounds
okay.
All right.
Any other questions, Mel or Jean?
I think that's it for now.
Okay, good. So we're gonna go on with just the last couple slides about the application process, which if you, with all this great information, have decided that org studies would be a great fit for you, there is a little hurdle of an application process. It's because we are a small program, relatively new, and we are building our faculty, but we don't yet have enough resources to support a huge student body. And so we have to have an application process to keep our class size at the level that we can handle. So our student services coordinator, Emily Jones, is going to talk about the application process. Emily?
Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing well this evening. Like Kathy said, my name's Emily, and I'm the new-ish student services coordinator here in Org Studies. I've probably met with a number of you, so if you're here, I'm glad you've come. I'm happy to see you. So just talking a little bit about the application process, we will be opening our application up soon. So it'll be opening up, available to you November 1st, and it's going to be closing Monday, January 25th. We've moved it. Normally it is, the deadline is Martin Luther King Day, but in light of some extenuating circumstances, we've moved it. We understand that you won't be starting classes until after Martin Luther King Day, so we've decided to extend that deadline. So what you'll do when you apply, you will complete the online application form, which you can find on our website. That'll be up, as I said, November 1st. The old one is actually up still. I know I've shown a few of you that just to give you a sense of what it looks like. It's a very simple form. So you are going to click on that link. There's going to be a little section on your prerequisites that you'll check off. And then there's going to be a couple of essay questions, which tend to stay the same. As I said, I encourage you to look at the application we have there. It tends to be something like, why are you interested in applying to organizational studies, and what do you hope to contribute, or what can you contribute to organizational studies? So you will submit your essay there, and you will upload your resume. So there are 3 components to your application. So your essay, your resume, and of course your transcript, which you don't need to worry about because as U of M students, we have access to your transcript. You will be notified via email before registration for fall term begins. So again, with the deadline being January 25th, you'll probably find out sometime in February, at the latest, probably March, but I'm thinking, Kathy, it'll probably be February.
Yeah, late February.
Late February. You'll find out, if you're admitted, and admission is once a year in the winter term, and the cohort will all begin together fall of 2021. So that's how it's done here. You can only apply one time. So I encourage you to really work hard on that application, work hard on that essay, that resume, workshop it, have it looked at, have a trusted mentor, friend look at your essay, look at your resume, because you can only do it one time. So you want to make sure it's the best it can possibly be. And most of our applicants are second year students. I know I saw in our poll earlier that we have at least one junior here, which is great, it's fine. But typically our students are second year students that apply sophomore year and begin the program as juniors. It's designed to be a 2-year program, so taking place, or you'll be in the program over the course of your junior and senior years. You, at the time of application, you can be enrolled in one of your prerequisites. So as Kathy talked about earlier, there are 3 prerequisites. So we have Econ 101, and then we have our Psych 101, and there are a number of other psych classes that can apply other than 101s, like 101, 102, and then a few others. And then we have our sociology prerequisite as well. So you can be enrolled in one of those when you apply. So let's say that, this you've already taken, for example, let's say you've taken your psychology prerequisite and like right now you're enrolled in your soc, but you haven't done econ yet. Does that mean you can't apply? No, as long as you enroll in that for next semester, you can apply. You can be enrolled in the last prerequisite at the time that you apply for the program. So that's good news in case any of you were worried about the fact that you don't have these prerequisites done yet. Yes. So as for our contact information, we have advising appointments available for our prospective students. Like I've said, I probably talked to a number of you. I've spoken to quite a few people in the last couple of weeks that are interested in the program. I'm always happy to talk to anyone interested in org studies. And I find that it's usually easier and probably more beneficial to talk virtually. Since I can't talk to you in person, it's better to talk virtually, but I think it's better than emailing back and forth. I think the students tend to get more out of it. So I'm always happy to meet with you via Zoom, and you can make that appointment on our website. On the homepage, I think there's a little button that says make an appointment with an advisor. And then when you click on that link, you'll choose prospective students. And then you can select me, again, Emily Jones. And then we also have our peer mentors, Simran and Anita. And they are current students in the program who meet with prospective students as well. And they're great. We are located, I don't know how relevant this is right now, given that none of you can probably go anywhere, but we are located on the 8th floor of Weiser Hall. It's a really great space. We will get back in there one day. And we're always happy to field your questions, respond to your emails. You can contact me, any of us at org.studies@umich.edu. And yes, so happy to answer any questions about the application.
Yeah, Mel and Jean, have we had some questions come in that have to do, well, at this point, we can throw it open to any kinds of questions. All of our student panelists and alums are here, so anybody can jump in and help answer. So what have we got that has not yet been answered?
Yes, lots of application questions.
Okay.
So do you weigh one part of the application over another when evaluating the applications? And also, what are some ways to stand out in your application?
Okay, I can start. These are questions I get a lot, pretty much every time I meet with someone is, I'll do this for the second one first. So what can I do to make myself stand out? People ask that in a variety of ways, but what I will tell you and what I've told everyone in the past is that when you are writing this essay, please don't try to be someone you're not. So I mean that is, you know, it's kind of a cliche to be yourself, but we really mean it. There's no profile you should be trying to fit when you're applying to this program. There's no magic formula. There's no, don't need to be involved in any specific student organizations or clubs or have taken certain classes. The committee, the admissions committee is really looking for a group of students, group of 50 or so students that are each bringing something unique and special to the program. So they would love to see when they're reading these essays, looking at these applications, they want to see people with coming from a variety of backgrounds, experiences, perspectives, interests, passions, goals. So I think the best advice I can give you is not trying to fit a profile, but really trying to explore and develop what you want to study and what you want to do. So organizational studies is an interdisciplinary program. There's a lot of freedom and flexibility within it. So think about what you're passionate about, what you're interested in, what do you want to do? And the more you develop yourself as an individual, develop your interests, the more you'll have to draw on when you're writing this essay. And then as for the first question, which was, what was it again, Jean or Mel?
Do you weigh one part of the application over others?
Okay, great question. So one great thing about this program, in my opinion, great thing, is that the committee take a holistic approach to evaluating prospective students. So as I mentioned, there are 3 different parts of the application. So we have the transcript, right? And we have the essay and the resume. So when the committee is sitting down and looking at these, I've had a lot of, I've had, you know, a fair number of students anxious about the transcript portion. They're worried that their GPA is not high enough to get in. The GPA, I mean, it matters, but I wouldn't say it's the be all and end all. It's not gonna be the make or break element. I know that, you know, we've had students with a 4.0 perfect GPA that have not gotten in. And we've had students, you know, maybe more in like the low 3 range that have gotten in. And that's because, as I said, the committee is looking at more than your GPA. They're looking at the whole student. So if you're anxious about your GPA, don't despair. Still apply. As I said, that essay is very important. And your resume is important as well. Again, that the people reading these applications are looking at the whole student and evaluating the whole student and thinking about what you as an individual, a student, a scholar can bring to the program. And there's more than just your GPA that you're bringing into this program.
Thank you. And then also, how many people typically apply versus how many end up getting accepted?
Sure, yeah. So we tend to get about 180 to 200 applications per cycle, and admit usually 50. So I know sometimes it's give or take a couple of students that end up in the program. So it's not, sometimes it's not a perfect 50 or a perfect 100. But at any given time, we'll have 100 students in the program. So about 50 juniors, 50 seniors. So it is a fairly competitive program. So like I said, 180 to 200 applicants, 50 people getting in. translates to about a 25% acceptance rate. So it is quite competitive, which is why we always recommend, as you're planning on if you're planning your application, you're working on it, we encourage everyone to have develop another route, another potential route. I've talked to a number of students. Some of them are looking into applying to the School of Information as well, or maybe the School of Public Policy, or they're looking at being an econ or a psych major. There's no one way to get where you want to go. So of course you're here because you want to do org studies. We want you to do org studies. But in the event that it doesn't work out, it'd be great for you to have another plan in mind, which is why we recommend doing that, since it is fairly competitive.
Great. And then another question that students are having is, with regard to the resume, should this be kind of your typical one-page resume, or is it okay if they go over that one-page limit? And then also people are curious about what types of activities and work experience that the admissions committee is looking for on the resumes specifically.
Sure, yeah, with your resume, I'm hoping all of you have a working resume that you've started, but if not, now's the time. So we do have a career center here. Well, not that you'd be able to go in person, but we do have a career center. I remember I used it just to have someone look at your resume again, have someone look at it. So if you have someone you trust in your life, a parent, mentor, someone, make sure you're having your resume looked at. As for length requirements, I did at one time work in the career center over in College of Engineering, and we always recommended, if you're going to go onto the second page, at least go halfway down that second page. Keep it to one page. I'd say I can't tell you like don't do this, or has to look a certain way. But we want it to be professional, neat. This isn't a CV, so it doesn't need to be 10 pages long. But as for specific things on the resume, I think you mentioned like student organizations or different involvements. Again, there's no magic formula of like you have to be involved in these organizations, and you need to have this volunteer experience, and you need to have this study abroad experience. We're not looking for that. So the committee isn't looking for like flags. Again, when the committee is evaluating each student, they're looking for individuals. So people bringing their own unique experiences, whether that is service, student organization involvement, community involvement, research, study abroad, actual work experience. You can really tailor your resume. And again, we encourage that you to make sure everything is polished before you're submitting it. Your essay and your resume can really complement each other. So you don't have to worry about shoving everything into the resume or shoving everything into the essay. They ask for both for a reason. So the two things can complement each other.
Great, thank you. And then I think this question could go to Kathy. With COVID and everything going on, and the no credit COVID or credit but grades covered, how is that being factored in to this year's admissions process, if at all?
That's going to be interesting. Our faculty know that students are going to have academic records that look different than we've seen in the past. And last year we put on our website that for prospective students, we would not make a judgment if they decided not to uncover their grades. So we will not be factoring that in any negative way. Your decisions about keeping the pass fail versus graded for last semester was completely your own decision, and our faculty are aware that students made various decisions for various reasons, and we will simply honor that and make our decisions as best we can with less information than we've had in the past. But our faculty are still confident that they can get a sense of who you are and of your academic performance by the transcript, the essay, and the resume that they will look at all together. So whatever you did with your grades last semester, or if you end up withdrawing from some courses this semester, I've talked to a couple of prospective students who are going to have lighter semesters this fall because some courses didn't work out virtually as they thought they would, and so they've had to drop them. So we understand that this is all just a mess, and so we're not going to be making any harsh judgments in any way on the academic records at this point.
Perfect. And does submitting applications on the early side help out chances of being admitted?
No. Our deadline, at the deadline date, we process all the applications and they go out to faculty for reading all at one time after that deadline date. So there is no benefit to applying early. That being said, I would suggest that everybody put in your application a day or two before the deadline. We've had too many panicked calls and emails of students trying to submit their application at 11:59 on the deadline, and they're at their roommate's apartment and the Wi-Fi went out and they can't get their application. So give yourself a little time, but there's no benefit to putting it in a week early or anything like that. When you've got it done and you're feeling good about it, then go ahead and submit it and just make sure it's a little bit in front of the deadline so that if you run into technical issues, there's no problem.
Awesome. And I know that we're running out of time, but we have maybe a couple more questions if
If people want to hang on, we're happy to keep answering questions.
Okay, awesome. So somebody asked if there was any way or place on the application itself for applicants to explain or justify certain grades or maybe experiences, anything like that.
We did add some language to our website, I think. I'm going to have to go back and look. I may have been waiting until November 1st when the application goes live. We are going to have an additional part. We're going to ask you to add it to your essay page, but we're giving a little kind of COVID addendum that if there's something that you wish to explain, there's a word limit on the essay, and so you'll still have that word limit, but then there'll be another paragraph, a brief paragraph that you can add to explain anything that you want to explain in your record that has occurred because of the situation that we've found ourselves in since last March. So you will have an opportunity to do a little explanation there, maybe not as much as you would like, but hopefully you can, again, just throw up the flag that this looks this way because of these challenges I was facing. And our committee is indeed willing to take that into account.
Perfect, thank you. And then somebody also asked if we don't get in, and you might have already answered this a little bit, Kathy, but can we still take org studies classes?
Absolutely. When registration opens, again, usually most spaces are reserved for OS students because we need to get them their cluster A's and B's and C's and the courses that they need in order to graduate. But within about a week and a half of registration opening, all of our students would have registered. And at that point, there are often seats left in our seminars. And so, yes, you can keep your eyes out for OS courses. And if there's room, we are happy to have you. And we know that that kind of adds a little bit to our courses too, if we have a mix of org study students and then maybe some students majoring in something else. So that works.
Awesome. Then I think that's all from the Q&A that we have. And if we missed your question, we're very sorry. And please email the, I assume to email the org studies email and we can get back to you.
Yep, anybody who either didn't want to type in a whole long question or thought your question may be unique to you individually, we understand that that happens. So feel free to send us an email or to make an appointment with either Emily or one of our peer mentors, Simran or Anita. They're seniors in the program as well, and see prospective students all the time. So if you want again, a student reflection on the program, Simran and Anita are great to talk to. And we'll explain as much as we can about the application process, and then we have all the way until January for the applications to get in. So you've got some time to think about this and to do your preparation. Anything else come into the Q&A, or are we good to go?
We are good to go, I believe.
All right. I would like to thank Jean and Mel and Kim and Jordan and Jason and Sarah and Emily and Chelsea and Mark for all spending some time this evening to give this information to you so that you can make a good judgment about whether org studies is the right major for you and feel prepared as the application cycle is coming up, at least for the sophomores. Freshmen, you've got a little more time. So please feel free to email us. Thank you for joining us this evening.